The silence after the battle was heavier than the noise that had filled it. The last shrieker pulse had faded, leaving behind a grotesque nebula of shattered chitin, frozen bioacid, and the drifting remnants of the once unstoppable swarm. Elea Prime, scarred but intact, hung in space behind this new field of debris. Its cities still shone, its people still breathed. They had been saved. The human fleet hung in the stillness, but it was a broken formation. The charge through the convulsing swarm had been a brutal, punishing affair. The UE's vengeance bled atmosphere from a dozen gashes along its port side. On the bridge, the air was thin and cold. Alarms chirped with persistent, tired complaints. Commander Minsu ignored them, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. Icons blinked red for damaged ships, black for lost ones. The frigate Wraith was gone, vaporized by a devourer's death throes. The scout ship Whisper was not responding. Minsu's jaw tightened. Daiho's last transmission had been a calm report of engine failure before the signal was swallowed by the swarm. "Commander," a voice crackled over the combs. It was Hana from the main engineering bay. She sounded breathless, in pain. "Primary drive is dead. Shrieker array is fused. We have life support on the bridge and in sections 3 and 5 only. Fire in section 2 is contained, but we lost people." "Understood, Chief," Minsu said, his voice gravelly. "Stand by." On the view screen, a new set of icons appeared. The remnants of the alien defense fleet, battered and ashamed, were regrouping. And among them, the gleaming flagship Harmony of the Ages was moving forward, a single, tentative communication request blinking on the console. .eun. Her arm in a makeshift sling looked at Jin. The ambassador stood at the viewport, not looking at the console ships, but at the drifting wreck of a Gold frigate, its name scorched but readable, Sanctuary's Promise. He gave a single, slow nod. Minsu accepted the call. Counselor Tuvor's face appeared on the screen. The ancient diplomat looked shattered. His proud bearing collapsed into a posture of profound exhaustion and dawning horror. Behind him, his bridge crew stared, their expressions a mix of awe, fear, and shame. "Commander Minsu?" "Ambassador Jin," Tavor began, his melodic voice now strained and thin. "The Galactic Council and the people of Elea Prime owe you a debt that can never be repaid. Your courage, your sacrifice. You have saved billions." The words hung in the thin air of the Vengeance's bridge. No one spoke. The silence was an answer. Tavor pressed on, clearly unsettled. "In light of this heroic action, the Council has voted unanimously to rescind the previous treaty. The embargo on Earth is lifted. Your seats on the Council are restored, with greater honor. We welcome you back as full partners, as heroes of the galactic community." Jin stepped forward, into view of the screen. His face was calm, but his eyes were like chips of flint. "We are not heroes, Counselor. We are survivors. And we are not partners." He spoke slowly, each word precise. "You watched our colonies die to buy your peace. You called it a tragic necessity. Do you feel tragic now, Counselor? Or just relieved?" Tavor flinched. The decision was a mistake, a catastrophic error in judgment. "We see that now. We must move forward, together, to heal." "Heal." Jin's voice remained quiet, but it carried the weight of a world's grief. "You cannot heal a wound by pretending the knife was never wielded. You offered our people to the darkness to keep your light safe. We have dragged that darkness back into the light and burned it in front of you. Our job here is done." On the tactical screen, Minsu directed the surviving Gault ships. They were not moving to dock with the alien stations for repairs. They were maneuvering slowly, painfully, toward the drifting human wrecks. Tug drones, themselves scarred and battered, were being launched. They were not collecting trophies. They were collecting corpses and crippled hulls. "What are you doing?" Tavor asked, confusion replacing his diplomatic tone. "We are taking our dead," Minsu said, finally looking at the screen. "And our living. And we are leaving." "Leaving? To where?" "Your home is Earth. You are part of the community." "No," Jin said, "the finality absolute. The community exists by the consent of its members. It functions on shared trust and mutual defense. You have shown us the true value of those words. Humanity no longer consents." He looked past Tavor, as if he could see the gleaming spires of Alea Prime itself. "You will have your peace, counselor. We will not trouble you with our emotional fury again. You will rebuild your beautiful cities. You will tell tales of the great battle. And in those tales, you will remember. You will remember the price you asked others to pay. And you will remember that when the price became yours, it was the ones you sold who came to pay it. Not as your saviors, but as your judges." The communication line stayed open, but Tuvor had no more words. He simply stared, the weight of Jin's sentence settling upon him, more crushing than any military defeat. Across the battlefield, the work continued. A life pod from the destroyed Whisper was recovered. Inside, Pilot Deo was found alive, unconscious but breathing. Hana, her leg fractured, supervised from a chair as her remaining engineers patched the worst of the Vengeance's wounds. Just enough for a slow jump. One by one, the human ships, trailing debris and sorrow, finished their sad collection. They formed up not in a victory parade, but in a grim funeral procession. The Council fleet watched, silent and unmoving, as the gray ships turned their battered prows away from the light of the core worlds. They pointed toward the dark, uncharted spaces beyond the galactic rim, where there were no councils. No treaties, only the cold, honest stars. With a last, flickering surge of their damaged drives, the human fleet initiated their jump. They did not vanish in a brilliant flash. They faded, like ghosts finally finding rest, into the endless black. On the bridge of the harmony of the ages, and across the saved world of Alea Prime, the silence they left behind was complete. It was the silence of a debt that could never be repaid, and a lesson that would never be forgotten. They had their peace, and it tasted of nothing but ash and shame. The core world of Alea Prime was a jewel. Its cities shone with gentle light. Its orbits were busy with peaceful trade and glittering pleasure craft. It had known war only as a distant, abstract tragedy on the news feeds. Now, for the first time in centuries, the shadows of real fear fell upon its gleaming spires. The first warnings were confused. A mining outpost on the edge of the alien system went silent. Then a deep space relay station. The signals didn't just stop. They were severed mid-transmission. An hour later, the long-range telescope saw it. It was not a fleet of ships. It was a stain, a blot of seething darkness moving against the starfield, swallowing the light. The Devourer swarm had arrived. The Council's buffer had not slowed it. It had nourished it. Panic, pure and electric, shot through the Council's networks. The defense fleet, the pride of Alea Prime, scrambled. Their ships were beautiful, polished, designed for parade and polite deterrence. They streamed out to meet the swarm, their formations perfect, their commanders broadcasting confident proclamations. The battle was not a battle. It was a butchering. The Devourer vessels were not ships, but living things, all jagged edges and organic weapons. They moved with a terrifying, unified intelligence. They ignored the fancy maneuvers of the alien fleet. They simply engulfed it. Plasma beams that could pierce asteroid rock glanced off chitinous hide. The swarm parted around the largest capital ships, then closed in from all sides. tearing them apart with physical claws and bioacid. From the bridge of the UES Vengeance, hidden by its stealth systems and a convenient dust cloud in the outer system, the humans watched. The main display showed the brutal, one-sided carnage in silent, clinical detail. Commander Min-Su stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face a mask. Around him, the crew worked quietly, the only sounds the beeps of consoles and the low hum of the ship. There was no satisfaction on the deck, no cheers. They watched the destruction of those who had betrayed them, and they saw only the confirmation of their own people's fate. This was what had happened to Juan's Rest. "They are dying too quickly," Yoon said softly, standing beside Jin. "The swarm will waste no time on the fleet. It will head for the planet within the hour." Jin nodded. He looked older, the weight of weeks in the void etched into his face. But the grief had been forged into something unyielding. Open a direct, single-channel link to Counselor Tuvor's flagship. Audio only. On the main alien command ship, Harmony of the Ages, chaos reigned. Alarms blared. Damage reports screamed from every console. Tuvor stood amidst the panic, his graceful limbs trembling. The confident diplomat was gone, replaced by a terrified elder watching his world end. A priority signal chimed, a secure, unrecognized channel. He accepted it, desperate for any information. "Counselor." Jin's voice was calm, flat. It carried no anger now. That fire had burned down to cold, hard coal. Tuvor froze. "Ambassador Jin? Where are you? Is Earth sending aid?" "The Council demands." "The Council," Jin interrupted, his voice cutting through the static and the distant sounds of alarms on Tuvor's bridge, "can demand nothing. You are reaping what you sowed. Look at your screens, Tuvor. That is what you purchased with the lives on Juan's Rest. You bought time. Your time is up." On the visual feed from the Vengeance, Jin could see the swarm breaking away from the shattered fleet. Like a wave of locusts, it began to move toward the blue-green marble of Alea Prime. The real screaming would soon begin. "You called us impulsive." "Emotional," Jin continued. "You said our fury was a weakness. Watch now and see what true fury looks like. It is not a scream. It is silence. It is the silence after your own weapons fail. It is the silence of a decision already made." He cut the transmission. On the bridge of the Vengeance, Min-Su turned from the screen. His eyes met those of his crew. He saw Hana, her hands steady on the engineering console that now controlled the untested Shrieker. He saw the communications officer, a young woman named Mi-Cha, who had lost a brother on New Daegu. He saw the resolve, the hardened grief, the readiness. He opened the fleet-wide channel. His voice was not a shout. It was a low, clear command that went out to every waiting Galt ship, hanging unseen in the darkness. All ships. "This is Min-Su. The enemy is at the door. Not our door, theirs. They have seen the cost of their peace." He paused, the memory of the static-filled screams from a distant colony hanging in the air of the bridge. For Juan's Rest, for New Daegu, for Sanctuary. Light the Shriekers. Advance and engage. The U-East Vengeance shuddered as its main drives, silent for so long, powered to full. Across the dark, 12 other capital ships and their escorts did the same. Their stealth systems disengaged. To the sensors of the panicking aliens and the mindless devourer swarm, it was as if a new constellation had suddenly blazed to life. But they did not appear between Alea Prime and the swarm. They did not place themselves as a shield for the Council world. They emerged on the far side of the swarm, a solid, grim line of gray metal against the black. They positioned themselves with the devourer swarm between them and the Council fleet. The message was as clear as it was brutal. They were not here to protect. They were here to attack. The Devourers, sensing new, concentrated biological signatures, began to shift, a part of the swarm turning to face this new threat. The human ships did not form a defensive formation. They formed a spearhead. Shrieker systems at 100%, Hannah reported, her voice tight. Power coupling is holding. For now, all ships lock on to the primary convergence point in the swarm's center mass, Minsu ordered. Fire on my mark. The swarm rushed toward them, a tidal wave of teeth and claws and mindless hunger. Mark. There was no brilliant lance of plasma, no volley of missiles. From the spine of each human capital ship, a visible distortion pulsed out a wave of nothingness that made the starlight behind it shimmer and bend. The gamma pulse was invisible, but its effect was not. The leading edge of the Devourer swarm did not explode. It convulsed. Ships that had moments before moved with unified purpose suddenly twisted, spinning out of control. They crashed into each other. The eerie, unified screech that always accompanied the swarm shattered into a cacophony of discordant, pained shrieks. The neural frequency that bound them, the single note of their hive mind, had been struck by a dissonance so profound it broke the symphony. The effect cascaded inward, a wave of catastrophic confusion. The swarm didn't just stop. It turned on itself. Vessels armed with bioacids sprayed it indiscriminately at their own kin. Claws meant for tearing hulls ripped into the chitin of neighboring creatures. The human fleet did not pause. They drove forward into the heart of the chaos, their conventional weapons now opening fire, picking apart the disoriented monsters. It was brutal, close-quarter slaughter. The Vengeance rocked as a dying Devourer ship scraped along its hull, its claws shrieking against the metal. On the harmony of the ages, Tuvor and his crew watched, stunned into silence. The terrifying swarm that had annihilated their fleet in minutes was being systematically torn apart by the humans they had condemned. The humans fought with a cold, ruthless efficiency that was more frightening than the Devourer's mindless hunger. They did not fight for glory. They fought with the focused rage of a people who had nothing left to lose but their vengeance. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned with a single shocking pulse. The Council's salvation had arrived, but it had not come with offers of peace or negotiations. It had come from the cold dark, behind the enemy, with weapons born of betrayal and a silence that promised no forgiveness. Deep space was a different kind of silent. It wasn't the shocked quiet of Earth, but a vast, listening stillness. The stars here, near the old Devourer migration routes, were pinpricks of cold light, offering no comfort. The UES Vengeance hung in the void, its gunmetal gray hull soaking up the starlight, making it little more than a faint smudge against the black. Inside, Commander Minsu stood on the command deck, a space lit by soft, tactical glows. The air hummed with quiet activity and focused tension. Crew members spoke in low tones. The main display showed the swirling, ugly scar of what had been Colony World Wang's rest. No transmissions came from there anymore. Just the lingering spectral evidence of violence. Pilot Theo's voice came through the speaker, clear and calm. Scout ship Whisper holding position at the marker. Still no sign of Council patrols. Their sensor net has a blind spot here, just as we predicted. It's like they don't want to look at what they've done. Minsu nodded, though Deo couldn't see him. Hold your position, Whisper. Continue passive scans of the swarm's debris trail. We need to know their exact vector. Understood, Commander. The plan was in motion. While Earth's government loudly, publicly, fell apart in a spectacle of grief and furious but useless diplomacy, the Galt fleet had slipped away. They had drifted past the Council's arrogant embargo lines like ghosts, using gravity wells and cosmic radiation bursts as cover. Now they were out in the dark places, the places the Council had given away. Engineer Hana moved through the tight corridors of the Vengeance. A datapad in one hand, a fusion wrench magnetically clipped to her leg. Her world was a symphony of heat, vibration, and complex problems. Her current problem was the main power coupling for the prototype Shrieker array. The theory was solid, but metal and energy had their own opinions. She entered the modified forward battery bay. The massive plasma cannons were being carefully taken apart. In their place, a lattice of strange crystals and waveguides was being assembled. It looked fragile, beautiful, and utterly deadly. A junior engineer, a young man named Tay, looked up, his face smudged with coolant. The third emitter array is refusing to sync with the central generator. Chief, the feedback loop is unstable. It could burn out the whole module on activation. Hannah knelt, calling up schematics on her pad. Show me the phase variance. She studied the numbers, her mind working through the physics. The council alloy in the waveguide is too pure. It's conducting the resonance too perfectly, causing a standing wave. We need to introduce a calculated impurity. A slight scatter. How? Tay asked, looking worried. We don't have the facilities for molecular tailoring out here. Hannah smiled. A quick, tough thing. We have a machining bay and micrometer drills. We're going to give it a very, very precise dent. It was brutal, hands-on work. This was their reality now. They weren't fighting with issued weapons. They were making their own, from stolen parts and sheer will. On the Whisper, Deho watched his screens. The debris from the Devourer swarm was distinctive. Organic-looking chunks of chitin and strange, fossilized resins. His scans were confirming Dr. Suman's worst fear. The debris showed higher biomass density and more complex neural structures than the samples from the last battle. The Devourers hadn't just consumed Wang's rust. They had grown stronger from it. They were evolving, and they were moving. Their course projection, a glowing amber line on his screen, was clear. They were not stopping to digest. They were heading, slowly but inevitably, toward the heart of Council space. Deho sent the data packet back to the Vengeance. He felt a cold knot in his stomach. The Council's betrayal was even more stupid than it was cruel. They had thrown meat to a fire, thinking it would go out. Instead, the fire had grown taller and was now turning toward them. The first acquisition raid was a tense, silent ballet. A small council logistics depot, automated and lightly guarded, orbited a barren moon on the fringe. 2 Gault frigates, the Shadow and the Shade, detached from the main fleet. They didn't attack. They approached with all stealth systems active, like predators stalking prey. They matched the depot's spin. Magnetic grapples shot out, connecting with a soft thump that echoed through the halls. Then, teams in simple vacuum suits, not military armor, crossed the gap. They bypassed the simple security with codes purchased years before from a shady trader. They didn't take everything. They took high-yield fuel cells, precision navigational crystals, and canisters of rare gases used in sensor systems. The things needed to keep a hidden fleet running and to build a terrible new weapon dot as they left. One of the team members slapped a small device onto the depot's main communication antenna. It was a simple data burst transmitter. Back on the Vengeance, the signal was received. Min Su gave the order. Do it. Across the sector, every still-functioning communication relay, every public news frequency, every private council diplomatic channel, erupted with a burst of raw data. It was the unedited transmission from Wang's rest, the screams, the panic, the alien screeches, and finally, the static. It was followed by a single line of text in all major council languages. This was the price of your peace. Then, the Gault fleet was gone, disappearing back into the dark before any patrol could respond. The effect was not immediate, but it was profound. The council did not issue a statement, but their patrol patterns changed. They became more nervous, more scattered. They started looking over their shoulders, not just at the expected threat from the Devourer swarm direction, but at every shadow in the void. They were realizing humanity was not broken. They were just no longer visible days turned into weeks. The work in the Vengeance's battery bay was exhausting. Hana and her team worked in shifts, sleeping next to their tools. The first Shrieker array was completed. It looked like a brutalist sculpture welded to the ship's spine. "We cannot test it, Commander," Hana reported to Minsu, her voice hoarse with fatigue. "A full power test would light us up on every sensor from here to the core worlds. And we don't have a spare power core if we burn this one out." Minsu looked at the array on the engineering schematic. "Then we trust the math, Chief Engineer. And we wait for the right moment." That moment was coming. Daiho's daily reports showed the Devourer swarm's progress. It was a storm cloud of life, churning its way across the star map. It had reached the first of the buffer worlds the Council had cynically offered after the human colonies. There was no one there to scream. The world was scoured silent in a matter of hours. The swarm grew denser, stronger. The Council's fear was now a tangible thing. Their earlier confidence was gone. They began to fortify their core worlds, pulling ships back from the embargo lines around Earth. The cage around humanity was weakening. Not because of mercy, but because of growing panic. Minsu gathered his captains on a secure channel. Their faces, grim and determined, filled a small screen in his ready room. "The Council is finally seeing the monster they fed," he said. "They are looking for their fleet, which is now tied down protecting their own homes. They are looking for the Devourers, who are coming for them. They are not looking for us." He leaned forward. "We stay in the shadows. We let the Devourers reach the Council's doorstep. Let them feel true fear. Let them understand what they sentenced our people to. Then, and only then, do we show ourselves to save them?" asked the captain of the frigate Wraith, her voice hard. Minsu's smile held no warmth. "No, to show them how it's done, and to show them what they chose to betray." The call ended. The silent war of observation, of theft, of psychological pressure continued. The human fleet was a specter, a rumor, a chilling burst of truth in the night. They were the reminder of the crime, and they were slowly, carefully, forging the blade for their revenge. This response is I-generated. For reference only, write Part 1. All of them one by one of 1,200 words, each in a separate document, and it should be interesting, and write it in third-person style. And it should be in simple and basic English. Use simple and basic English, and don't create more chapters. Headings or parts numbers in each part. Without heading, the Chamber of the Galactic Council was a place of impossible beauty and quiet power. It was a vast sphere, its inner surface a seamless view of the stars outside, making the delegates seated on floating platforms seem to hang in the very center of the universe. Soft light emanated from nowhere and everywhere. It was designed to inspire awe, to remind all who entered of the grand, peaceful union of species. It represented. Ambassador Jin of Earth did not feel awe today. He felt a deep, tired ache in his bones. The war against the Devourers had raged for 20 years. Humanity, newcomers to this galactic stage, had thrown itself into the fight with everything it had. Their ships had bled in distant star systems. Their soldiers had died on barren rocks, all to hold the line for this council. For a shared future, he adjusted the simple silver pin on his lapel, a map of Earth. Next to him, his aide Yoon watched the proceedings with sharp, attentive eyes. She was younger, her belief in the council's ideals still present, though frayed at the edges by years of diplomatic grunt work. The head of the council, an elderly being named Tivor, whose species resembled wise. Bipedal trees with gentle bark-like skin raised a graceful limb. The soft murmurs in the chamber died away. Esteemed delegates, Tavor's voice was a soothing, melodic sound translated seamlessly. The silence on Earth was heavier than any sound. The news had traveled faster than light, carried not by official channels, but by the last, desperate transmissions from Han's Rest and the other colonies. They were raw files of pure horror, and they had shattered the human spirit into a million sharp, angry pieces. Ambassador Jin sat in a stark white briefing room deep under the United Earth Command headquarters. The diplomatic polish was gone from his face, replaced by a pallor of grief and a simmering, icy rage. Across from him sat Commander Min-Su, a man whose face seemed carved from granite. Maps of the frontier, now stained red with projected loss-of-life figures, glowed between them. "They sold us," Jin said, his voice unnervingly calm. "They held the vote while our ships were covering their retreat from the Cygnus sector. It was all a performance." Min-Su grunted, his eyes fixed on the blinking icon that marked Han's Rest. It had gone dark 12 hours ago. Performance or not, the result is the same. 3 colonies, 800,000 souls, a buffer zone. He finally looked at Jin. "The Council fleet has moved to an embargo position. They are blocking any of our vessels from leaving the solar system. Officially, it is to prevent provocation of the Devourers." Yoon, Jin's aide, entered quietly, her tablet clutched to her chest like a shield. Her eyes were red, but her hands were steady. "The public broadcast networks are in chaos, Commander. The riots in Seoul and Brasilia are being contained, but just barely. The demand for retaliation is absolute." "Retaliation against whom?" Min-Su asked, turning his chair. "The Devourers? A biological swarm that outnumbers us 1,000 to 1? Or the Council, whose combined fleet is still 5 times the size of our entire active military?" "They expect us to scream," Jin said, leaning forward. "To shake our fists, to demand justice at the Council chamber. That is what we have always done. We argued. We appealed to logic. To fairness." He let out a short, bitter breath that was almost a laugh. "They have shown us what fairness is worth." The door slid open again, and Dr. Suman hurried in. She was a small woman with a fierce intelligence in her eyes. She didn't bother with greetings. "I finished the preliminary analysis of the devoured tissue samples from the Battle of the Belt. The Council gave us the debris to study, thinking we might find a conventional weakness. They were right, but not in the way they thought." She brought up a complex molecular model on the main display. It showed a twisting, barbed structure. Their exoskeletons are nearly impervious to plasma and kinetic rounds. Their ships are grown, not built. But their internal communication, the way the swarm mind operates, it's based on a precise resonant frequency in the gamma spectrum. It's how they think as one? Min-Su's eyes narrowed. "A frequency. Can we jam it?" "Not jam," Suman corrected, a flash of grim excitement in her voice. "Overload. Imagine a symphony hall where every instrument is perfectly tuned. Now imagine a single, deafening shriek at the exact pitch that shatters every violin string and bursts every eardrum simultaneously. That's the principle. A targeted, cascading gamma pulse would not just disrupt them. It would induce systemic neural collapse. The swarm would tear itself apart." The room was silent for a long moment. Jin broke it. "Can we build it?" Suman nodded once. "The theory is solid. The generator requires a massive power source and a delivery system that can get dangerously close. It's a suicide weapon for any single ship, but for a coordinated fleet attack." "We don't have a fleet," Yoon interjected softly. "Not one that can challenge a devourer swarm head-on. The first and third fleets were decimated covering the Council's retreat. The rest are bottled up by the embargo. A slow, hard smile touched Minsu's lips. It was a frightening sight. Who said anything about the official fleet? With a few taps on his console, the display changed. The star maps vanished, replaced by schematics of sleek, angular warships. They were unlike any vessel in the public Earth Fleet registry. They had no gleaming white hulls or proud insignias. They were gunmetal gray, all sharp angles and recessed weapon ports. Built for stealth and survival. Project Galt, Minsu said. Started 20 years ago, after the first contact war showed us how alone we really were. Funded by black budgets, built in the hidden shipyards of the asteroid belt and the moons of Uranus. No comforts, no families. Just engines, guns, and cloaking systems good enough to fool Council sensors. Our insurance policy. Jin stared, a flicker of the old hope, now twisted into something darker, awakening in his chest. How many? 12 capital ships, 48 frigates, and a support network of automated tenders, Minsu replied. A ghost fleet, crewed by volunteers who have been training for this for a decade. They are the best we have, and they have been waiting. For what? Yoon asked. For the moment when talking stopped, Jin answered, his gaze locked on the ghostly ships. For the moment when we had nothing left to lose. The plan formed in the cold, logical silence of the bunker. It was not a plan of glorious charge. It was a plan of shadows and patience. We cannot fight a war on two fronts, Minsu stated. The Council thinks they have us caged. Let them think it. Publicly, Earth will descend into what looks like paralyzing grief and infighting. We will scream at the Council, demand reparations, file protests. A perfect performance of helpless anger. And privately? Suman asked. Privately, the Galt fleet mobilizes. They slip through the embargo, using the sensor-blind spots we've mapped for years. Their first mission is not combat. It is observation and acquisition. Acquisition? Yoon echoed. The Council, Jin explained, is made of many species. They are not a monolith. Some worlds secretly oppose the treaty. Some will have sympathy. And all of them have supply depots, fuel stations, and communication relays on the fringe. We will take what we need to survive and to build Suman's weapon. We will not destroy. We will appropriate. And we will broadcast the truth of the betrayal on every frequency from their own relay stations as we do it. Suman looked at the schematics of the Shrieker, the gamma pulse weapon. Modifying the main batteries on the Galt capital ships will take weeks. And testing? There will be no testing, Minsu said flatly. The first live test will be against the Devourers. We get one shot. The weight of it settled on them. The silence returned, but now it was different. It was no longer the silence of shock. It was the silence of a decision made, a path chosen. It was the quiet of a deep breath before a plunge into darkness. Later, Jin stood at a viewport, looking not at the stars, but at the dark, rocky wall of the underground complex. Yoon joined him. We are becoming the monsters they fear we are, she whispered. Hiding, stealing, building weapons of horrific purpose. Jin didn't look away from the wall. They created the monster, Yoon. They looked at our compassion, our willingness to stand with them, and they saw a weakness to exploit. They saw a fence they could throw to the wolves to protect their own house. He finally turned to her, his eyes reflecting the cold light of the corridor. So we will show them the fence was not made of wood. It was made of steel, and it has just been pulled from the ground to become a spear. Let them fear it. The chamber of the Galactic Council was a place of impossible beauty and quiet power. It was a vast sphere, its inner surface a seamless view of the stars outside, making the delegates seated on floating platforms seem to hang in the very center of the universe. Soft light emanated from nowhere and everywhere. It was designed to inspire awe, to remind all who entered of the grand, peaceful union of species. It represented. Ambassador Jin of Earth did not feel awe today. He felt a deep, tired ache in his bones. The war against the Devourers had raged for 20 years. Humanity, newcomers to this galactic stage, had thrown itself into the fight with everything it had. Their ships had bled in distant star systems. Their soldiers had died on barren rocks, all to hold the line for this council. For a shared future, he adjusted the simple silver pin on his lapel, a map of Earth. Next to him, his aide Jung watched the proceedings with sharp, attentive eyes. She was younger, her belief in the council's ideals still present. Though frayed at the edges by years of diplomatic grunt work, the head of the council, an elderly being named Tavor, whose species resembled wise, bipedal trees with gentle bark-like skin, raised a graceful limb. The soft murmurs in the chamber died away. Esteemed delegates, Tavor's voice was a soothing, melodic sound translated seamlessly by the implants in Jin's ear. After long and difficult negotiations, a breakthrough has been achieved. A permanent armistice with the Devourer swarm is now within our grasp. A wave of relief, palpable and warm, flowed through the assembly. Jin felt his own shoulders begin to untense for the first time in months. Peace. The word was like water in a desert. The terms, Tavor continued, require a gesture of good faith from us. A demilitarized zone to allow the swarm to redirect its migratory patterns away from our core systems. To this end, several fringe systems will be vacated. A holographic star map blossomed in the center of the chamber. Jin leaned forward, his diplomatic calm hardening into professional focus. He studied the highlighted sectors. His blood went cold. The highlighted systems were not empty. They were not uninhabited rocks. Counselor, Jin's voice cut through the approving hum, sharper than he intended. He engaged his platform's amplifier. The systems highlighted include 3 planets with human designations: Huang's Rest, New Daeju, and Sanctuary. These are not outposts. They are established colonies. Millions of our citizens call them home. Tavor turned his patient, ancient gaze toward Jin. Ambassador Jin, we are aware of the settlements. The sacrifice is profound, and the galactic community will be eternally grateful. Arrangements for the evacuation will be evacuation? Jin interrupted, a breach of protocol he would never normally consider. You are talking about surrendering inhabited worlds to those things? As a feeding ground? This is not peace. This is a betrayal of every soldier who died holding the line at Cygnus Gap at the Belt of Serenity. A ripple of discomfort went through the chamber. Some delegates looked away. Others watched with cold, analytical interest. The sacrifice is necessary for the greater good of all, Tavor said, his tone still placid, but a finality had entered it. The treaty has already been signed. The Devourers have agreed to halt all advances in exchange for these territories. The swarm is already moving toward the designated systems. Jin felt the world tilt. The noise of the chamber faded to a dull roar in his ears. Signed? When? 3 weeks ago, Tavor said quietly. 3 weeks. While Jin had been here, in this very chamber, arguing for more military support for the front lines, while human scout ships had been patrolling the volatile borders, while families on Huang's Rest had been living their lives, unaware they were already sold. EUN was tapping frantically on her data slate, her face pale. She turned it to Jin. It was a live feed from the Colonial Administrative Frequency. The signal was weak, lagging by minutes due to distance, but it was there. It showed a normal daytime sky over Huang's Rest. The evacuation, Jin said, forcing his voice into a semblance of control. When does it begin? We need to mobilize every available ship from Earth, from our allies. He looked around the chamber, seeking the eyes of the delegates from the Loran Compact, from the hegemony of Kaval, species who had fought alongside humanity. They looked at their own platforms, at the stars, anywhere but at him. Tavor's next words were not melodic. They were simple, cold stone dropped into the silence. There will be no evacuation fleet, Ambassador. The Devourer's terms were explicit. Any attempt to remove biological material from the seeded systems would be seen as a violation. The armistice would collapse. To ensure the peace for trillions in the core worlds, the populations of the fringe systems must remain as a gesture of our commitment. The meaning hung in the air, ugly and absolute. They were not being evacuated. They were being left. A gift, a offering to the monster to keep it from the council's door. Jin stood up. His legs felt weak, but he locked his knees. "You left them," he whispered. Then his voice rose, raw and cracking, echoing in the magnificent chamber. "You left them to die. While we sat here, talking about peace, you condemned millions of my people. You used our courage as a shield, and then you sold the shield." Tavor did not flinch. It was a difficult decision, a tragic necessity. History will remember their contribution. History, Jin spat the word, will remember that the Galactic Council was a coalition of cowards. He tore the silver earth pin from his lapel. It felt cheap, insignificant. He didn't throw it. He simply opened his hand and let it fall. It tumbled silently, a tiny speck of silver, into the infinite starfield below his platform. At that moment, Boom gasped. Her data slate buzzed with an incoming priority alert, a direct colonial emergency broadcast. She fumbled with the controls, her hands shaking, and activated the audio. The sounds that poured into the hushed council chamber were not of starships or orderly evacuations. It was the sound of screaming. Human screaming, desperate and terrified, mixed with the distant, horrifying metallic shrieks of the Devourers. A man's voice, raw with panic, yelled, "They're in the sky. They're everywhere." The council said. The transmission dissolved into a roar of static, broken by more screams, the sounds of crumbling structures, and that awful, hungry screeching. Then nothing. Just a hollow, hissing silence. The sound had lasted less than 30 seconds. In the council chamber, the silence that followed was infinitely worse. Every delegate had heard. Many looked horrified. Some looked ashamed. Tavor simply looked resigned. Jin did not look at any of them. He stared at the star map, at the blinking light that was Wang's Rest, which had just gone dark. The horror on his face hardened, frozen by a cold so deep it burned. The grief was there, a bottomless well, but already something else was pouring in to fill the void. Something hot and solid and furious. He turned without a word. He stepped off the floating platform onto the exit walkway. Yoon, her face wet with tears, scrambled to follow him. Behind them, the council remained, suspended in their beautiful star-filled chamber. The peace they had bought was now official. And as Jin walked away, his footsteps echoing in the quiet corridor, the first ember of a different fire was lit. It was not the fire of sacrifice for the greater good. It was the simpler, older fire of a wrath that had been earned, drop by bloody drop. And it would not be contained.